it's culture. It's this concept, this thing that looks like Christianity, smells like Christianity, says it's Christianity, but ultimately it's not. And, I'm not 100% saying this is definitely the image of the beast, but the image of the beast is going to show up at some point. It'll look something like this Christian nationalism, something like this cultural Christianity, something like this kind of concept.
I'm Todd, and I was naughty. I did everything wrong. I got kicked out of art school, I drank heavily, and I looked to other religions and versions of spirituality to get fulfilled. The problem was, I was in the occult and I didn't even know it. My life was a wreck, and I had to learn what it meant to have a relationship with Jesus.
And I'm Laura. I was super nice. I did everything right. I got saved young, went to Moody Bible Institute, got married, and followed the Christian rules to having a good life. The problem was that formula didn't work. I had to change how I related with Jesus.
At the end of the day, what I learned is the very simple truth.
Jesus is the answer, the only answer,
And the only one that will ever actually fulfill you.
naughty
versus
nice.
And welcome back to Naughty versus Nice. I am your co-host, Todd.
And I'm, of course, Laura. I want to take your line now.
You put the of course in there. I heard
did.
it. You didn't
I
slip
took
it
it.
past me.
I'm trying to
I
be
was
Todd.
thinking about doing like an opening line, like something like the show, the Christian podcast where we talk about the thing and then the other thing.
That sounds
What
great.
do you think?
That's great. Right there. That's a T-shirt. Make it into a T-shirt.
Got that in, and that's what we're doing for the show. That's going to be the intro from now on.
Kelly, would you like to say
Wife.
something?
Oh, hi. I'm the wife. No.
There we go. So a lot to talk about, actually. Do you want to, where do we begin? There was a very recent, very public, very horrible incident that involved a young man in a college campus. And that kind of actually ties into the subject that we're going to be talking about, because not only did that whole situation happen, I'm sure everybody's talking about Charlie Kirk. And then we all sat down and kind of watched the Shiny Happy People Part 2, which talks about Teen Mania and Ignite the Fire and Ron Luce and a bunch of other guys. And then you've got this kind of all working together on the idea of Christian nationalism now. And one thing, well, not only that, but one of the things we talked about before in a past episode, the idea of cultural Christianity, the wanting all the benefits of Christianity, but none of the Jesus. I'm not trying to say one way or another about who Charlie was, for example. I don't know. I never met him, but the number of people on social media that I've seen that are like, I'm going to go to church now. I haven't been in 40 years and I'm going. And this is, I feel a closeness to him. And I want to share that relationship with God that he talked about and all these other things. I just see like a collision of all these things kind of happening. And I think that's kind of what we're going to parse out for this episode and probably discuss for the next one too.
Yeah, you think you laid it all out there. You got everyone's attention, right?
All right.
Well, if you hear some noise in the back, that's my dog. He's barking. I have no idea.
Was that
why,
Lenny?
but yes, and I am like, I can either interrupt you when you've kind of got your flow, or I can just let everybody know, hey, I have a dog. He barks like a really, really mean dog, but he's not. Yeah, so we went away. All of us went away for a podcast retreat. So we had a lot of time to plan for the next, year or so, and different goals we have and such. And so just by accident, Kelly had put on this Shiny Happy People, and I'd seen the first season of it, and they talk about the Duggars, but also, what's his name now? I can't think of his name. The guy who wrote the disc.
Bill Gothard.
Bill Gothard. Okay. And so there's a lot of thoughts we had from that. And so this one now is covering something that was, I think it begins with Acquire the Fire is what the movement was. And then it kind of turns into an organization called Teen Mania. And I would really recommend you go and watch the documentary. Each of these documentaries, it's been a little horrifying to hear things I've been told, some things I've repeated, thankfully, very, very mild, watered down versions of it. But they say things that you're like, wait, I've always heard that. Is that wrong? And that's because our experiences in the church are going to be good and bad. And so there's some of those things mixed in that in hindsight, we go, okay, that was bad. That shouldn't have been in there. But this man felt, I don't know if you would describe it differently, that they needed to raise up an army of politically motivated young people who would take back our nation. And they have to start young, break them down, and build them up to be soldiers. And so it was I never knew this happened. I didn't go to those events. That was something that probably just was a little bit, I'm just a few years older than Kelly. So I think I missed that wave, or I wasn't involved in a church that promoted it. I don't know. It was shocking. I mean, it's shocking. It was very, very not good. And I think that that's interesting because we as the church, this is a worldly documentary, but we are given these two documentaries that cover a good chunk of 20 to 30 years, where it's kind of like when a new pill comes on the market and you're better to try it 10 years later because they've had time to figure out who dies from it. That we're being told over and over what happens when you have a philosophy that has these motivations and it's an agenda that is accomplishing something spiritual on a national level. We know what it looks like. It's not going to end well. So I would advise everybody, that's kind of what motivated the topic for us, was to see how this teen mania, what kind of effect that had and what their motivations were and where are we hearing those things still. And there were some keywords and some ideas, and I think we'll get into that later, that I see over and over, and they're red flags to me. So anyway.
Well, there are a number of threads that all kind of, like I said, everything kind of collides together. You have this Bill Gothard thing that gets talked about within the very first season of Shiny Happy People, especially with the Duggar family. They used his curriculum in order to kind of raise their family and revolve not only their Christianity around or their education around, but even their identity itself. Kelly and I know somebody, a young woman who raised in a similar type of curriculum homeschool environment. And she would say things like, well, people like us aren't like people like you, or something to that effect. And I'm not, it's not a bad thing. I'm not like, but it showed that there was a separation in a weird sort of way, that the idea of we're separate from you in the way that we conduct ourselves, and we have our own subculture, and there are our own groups that we can all identify. There's in groups and out groups. And she wasn't mean and she wasn't disrespectful. She wasn't anything like that. But it was one of the first times that I ever even was aware of the idea that within at least homeschooling circuits that there was an in group and an out group to that, which never even occurred to me. I just kind of thought, you don't trust public schools and you want to, educate your kid yourself and choose the curriculum. That makes sense to me. Actually not against it at all. But there's more that goes along with it. And as I was watching this documentary, I was learning about Bill Gothard. I was seeing these threads, seeing these things. And then it culminates in the idea that the whole purpose of what they're trying to do with their movement is amass a group of young people that turn into adults that are politically minded, that are going to enact their vision of this material and put that into the public sphere through the legislative process, through governmental process, on the national stage or the local stage, however you want to look at it. You dovetail that with the second season that they're talking about, with this militant style movement of the teen mania. And the whole thing wasn't militant. Okay. It starts off as like rock concerts and like a variety show, comedy and that kind of stuff. But as it builds over the course of 2 decades, you see that the culmination in all of it is this extreme, we're at war with the world, like literally they want to kill us. We got to do something. And we've got to, get tough, get minded, get directed, get focused, and then go out and be an arrow piercing into the heart of the savage, ungodly people or whatever. The same concept, the same thing. So what I'm saying is there's decade after decade after decade after decade leading up to then you see somebody like Charlie Kirk going out into the public sphere, enacting change, doing it through the political arena. He's an activist, going to college campuses and having these dialogues, whether they're confrontational or whatever anybody's opinion is. But behind the backwork is this idea of, this Christ come kingdom now, let's make this utopia on earth kind of concept.
And I don't think that that's something, it's hard to see it because, it in the first episode or first season of Shiny Happy People, the last episode talks about the Duggards had tried to build some kind of organization that really raised up from young teen years politicians. And we want to put godly Christian men in political arenas. That doesn't sound bad. And I don't even know that it is bad. That's not the point. Isn't like, well, I'd love everything to go down the liberal toilet or something. The point is that the philosophies, the spiritual definitions of everything in at least that show and that episode, sorry, there's a bug flying in my face, they always lead to abuse. They always lead to division, polarity, duality, the things you're always talking about. Because you Oh my word! Sorry, it's a bug beelining for my head. It's opposing me. The bug is opposing me. No, there.
It's Satan. He's trying to stop you.
That's the next episode. No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
I don't know what I'm saying. It's going to come back to me. It's going to be beautiful. The idea that what happened, I think, with the Duggars, if I'm remembering correctly, and I think Kelly might remember better than I do, is there was so much corruption in that, and they raised up, at least under that curriculum, you had views about men and women that lead to oppression in marriage, abuse, and child molestation. That is a lot of what came out of that movement. And you're like, wait, how is that possible? Because his message was, basically a godly man is providing for his family and his wife submits to him and she stays home and takes care of the kids. Those aren't bad things. He's my spiritual head. He's my spiritual leader. Men need to step up and and women, you need to stay home and homeschool. Those aren't, on their own, they're not bad. But when you put it out there as a spiritual formula for being godlike, being Christ-like, and you're promising people with these statements, if you follow my formula that I'm clearly stating is the way to be godly, you will have success. So the ideas put out there, at least in the Gothard's curriculum, at least, is a woman, you should protect yourself and be a virgin and never have sex, be perfect, love Jesus, and you're going to attract a man that does the same. Well, if you want to know how not true that is, you can go back and listen to our divorce series, because I was that person and I certainly didn't get the reward. And that's what they're promising. And it ends up building up men and women who interact with each other in bad ways. Am I going off on a tangent? Why, yes, I am. I think it's I'm Todd today.
Finally, it's not me doing it for a change. You know what I mean?
Topic anymore.
We'll let you drive the YouTube algorithm for a while. It's I'm not saying it's every single one, and I don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but what I can tell you is this. I know scumbag guys because I've been a scumbag guy, and that's something. It's like, sorry, Kelly, I'm going to throw your dad under the bus. Growing up, her home life growing up, it was definitely the convict and the
Christian.
The Christian and the convict. And he's got an expression, and it's riffraff always finds riffraff. Kelly and I, we were out, actually, I don't know, I'll tell this one. We were in another country. We were backpacking through Central America. We spent about a year doing that. And we had some friends come and met us down, and we ended up staying at this one place. And the guy, we were all hanging out, having drinks, joking around, and he got up and he left for 15 minutes. I thought he had to go to the bathroom or something like that. We're in another country in a different language, a language he doesn't even speak. Came back in 15 minutes later, had drugs. He just knew how to find narcotics in a country he'd never been to, first time, in a language he didn't speak. He knew how to do it. Riffraff finds riffraff. And the idea that, I've met some of these guys. I know they're not upstanding guys. They're not these super swell guys. And not to be a jerk, but all you goody two-shoes Christian guys, can you please get an ex-biker friend or somebody who's beat people up or stabbed people or something? Make friends with that guy at church. The guy's got way too many tattoos. And then have him, who's obviously saved, okay, and has the fruit to show it. And then have him meet your daughter's boyfriends. He'll tell you what's going on with them. It's mind-blowing. And you were right about that. I don't know if it was Gothard himself or somebody, but there were plenty of accusations regarding him in young women.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. And then you have this situation with Shiny Happy People too. This, what was it? The academy camp or whatever they call it. It was like a college campus. You do a year there. All the labor is free. They're not even free interns. They actually had to pay in order to be part of the privilege of whatever they were doing. And then you've got this break them down mentality. We're preparing for war. It's literally having kids do the military thing where they wade in, water up to their chest and, under barbed wire or whatever and go through this military enactment. And I'm not even saying that's a bad thing in the right circumstance, but you got kids. I don't think they were expecting that. I think they were going to go share their love for Jesus and learn how to be more effective missionaries or something along that line. Next thing you know, they're getting yelled at. Somebody's throwing hand grenades off next to them. They weren't really throwing grenades, but reenacting a war scenario, and they're all coming back, psychologically scarred. And I'm not trying to be a jerk, but let's face it. homeschooled kids, they're not the toughest kids out there in the first place. You know what I mean? They're not starting a gang anytime soon. So
Were these kids mostly homeschooled that went to that? I didn't catch.
I don't know. That's the impression
Okay.
I get, you know?
I
I'm
don't know.
stereotyping apparently really a lot right now. But
I don't even know if homeschooling was as popular back then.
and our viewership just plummeted by half because it's like all homeschoolers that are watching right now. Sorry, I went to public school. I suck at math. Okay, you guys are beating me. You win. You know.
Yeah, the show was very disturbing because they had a psychologist on there just examining the cult like culture of the fear and the group mentalities. They put them in tough situations together. They developed certain kinds of friendships, but you also carry a friendship when you're all abused. You verify each other's experience, and in some ways that breeds a victim believing they've agreed to the behavior they're being subjected to. And so it's all that mentality. It's just breaking them down, building them up, but peer pressure and all of that, so that these people, like some of them left and they actually came back. And then of course they feel badly about it later. That's just part of how an abusive person or program has programmed you, basically. So it was a horrifying show to watch. I just didn't know about it, and I did not know some of the catchwords that I was hearing I heard in my own experience. It was so watered down. This one had far less things that resonated with me than the first season. But the words that I remember hearing is soldier, battle, unreached people. They were pressuring them with the pressure of, I remember that basically there's a certain number of unreached people, and until they're reached, Jesus can't come back. And so you need to get out there and get the gospel going, because we want to basically reach all people, and they're all dying, and you're not going, and it's kind of on you to save them. You get saved to become an evangelist. You don't get saved to have personal relationship with Jesus Christ. You get saved to go out and win souls and build God's kingdom, which is also likened to an army. Those are all things I heard. So my challenge is, those are buzzwords. Start listening to where you're hearing them now, because this pattern keeps repeating. It's not like Ron Lutz is the end of it, or Luce, or whatever his name is. Anyway.
No, it's definitely not. And I think he's got another organization that he's working with now. And I stumbled across it when we were doing research for the show. I want to go back on something that you were just talking about. You were talking about the idea of like stoking fear in the victim, especially a lot of these kids that were involved in this. And this, to make a cult member, to do multi-level marketing, to any kind of thing where you're cordoning off people in order to kind of sell them on an idea. You're not necessarily selling them on a product or selling them on a thought or concept. You're selling them on a complete package, so to speak, but you can't deliver the complete package all at once. So you have to create an environment in a situation in the victim or the target, or whatever term you want to use, where they're going to be captivated or captured and open to hearing what it is that you have to sell them. Your philosophy, your idea, your concept, whatever it is. And one of the ways that you do that is by invoking fear in the person, in the victim. And if you can invoke fear in a person, they get amped up, and then they get kind of nervous. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to turn. Now you have the opportunity to step in order to provide comfort. You have the opportunity to step in and give them reassurance. You have all these different opportunities that show up and happen. Running a cult's the same across the board. It doesn't matter the culture you're in. It doesn't matter the language you speak. That's why they're all kind of the same, because in order to create a cult, you kind of have to do the same stuff. It changes here and there. That whole twin flame thing, there's a documentary on that, for example, is one example. And then you have that one creepy weird lady who, after she, she like was blue. I don't know if you remember her, smoked a lot of weed, and then they wrapped her up in Christmas lights and stuff. And then you had two guys running around acting crazy in the middle of the desert. Like, it was the whole thing. There's different ways to do that. That's okay. All right. People that know. All right. Yeah. There's a few different ways to do this, but there's a 3-part process to it. And the first one is to invoke fear in the victim. So you want to portray certain groups or situations as a threat to their safety, a threat to their stability, a threat to their way of life, some kind of threat. You're parsing it out. You're creating kind of like an in-group and an out-group. So you want to let them know that there's the group of us over here, and you're part of that group over here. And over there is the reason you can't get a good job. Over there is the reason you can't afford a good house. Over there is the reason that your church attendance is getting smaller and smaller. Over there, whatever it is.
And in the case of this teen mania, how do you see that happening? There was one kind of drill sergeant guy, and there's always like a football coach. The difference being when you sign up to be on a football team, you know what you're getting into, and you can leave. But this guy is setting it up that do you want to be a loser? You want to be a loser? Like, it's all this social humiliation in order to motivate everybody to try to please him, in a sense, or please the standard. Is that kind of where you see this fear coming in?
Yeah, that's definitely in there. You also have the idea, like you were talking about, the idea that it's up to you. And if you don't go out and evangelize to the lost, or whatever that one term was that you had, that those people are lost forever, and it's kind of your fault. The other thing was, at the very beginning of the documentary series, maybe it was the first episode, all these people kind of dressed up as like mimes and clowns, which is ironic for its own different reason. Once again, Nephilim, if you know, you know. And then they would do these like plays and performances, but they did it all in pantomime. So they didn't speak the language or anything. It's a bunch of young kids who are 14 years old, thrown into another country. They don't know what they're doing there. They're trying to act out these abstract concepts to cover different like language and cultural barriers that they don't even know about that exist. And once again, if people don't get saved as a result of their mime performance, it's their fault. So they're seeing this sense of urgency. There's that in-group, that out-group concept, and the stakes are high. There's a sense of fear and a sense of urgency that's going along with it. Now, one of the ways that fear then gets alleviated is through the concept of the spectacle. And this is after creating that sense of fear, anxiety, and threat. The solution has to offer a powerful collective experience to relieve that fear and provide a sense of security, provide a sense of control, provide a sense of peace and safety that goes along with it. Now, it doesn't matter what that is. It can be the cult. You get abused by the drill sergeant guy, and then there's the cult leader who's actually warm and understanding. Good cop, bad cop. That kind of concept. And it can be over there, it's the illegal immigrants. They're the problem. They're the reason something, you can't get a job. And now they have the solution that comes in. I can't think off the top of my head, but there's a bunch of different things that'll pop in and out of how to offer to assuage the person's fear and anxiety and let them know things are going to be okay. But there's also the solution that's got to come. So you have to find out, how do we make things okay? And that's going to be where you're going to have the concept of loyalty being reinforced. So this stage, everything focuses on solidifying that emotional connection, that loyalty being forged during the shared spectacle. So the shared spectacle brings them down emotionally, grounds them, gives them peace, safety, and security. And then you have that loyalty concept of that shared experience with you and everybody else around you. And then also the person that's providing that sense of peace, safety, and security are the answers. Now, once again, what I said before, how do you get somebody to accept a long and complicated doctrine or philosophy that they normally wouldn't? Now they're going to be in a position where they're going to be more open, more receptive, hear your ideas and hear your thoughts as you start placing those ideas into them. And then ramp up the anxiety again, and then give them the loyalty. Ramp it up. Give them this is nothing but, this is push-pull, man. That's all it is. This is, this is an abusive boyfriend. This is why do you make me hate you? I don't like it. I don't want to hit you. Why do you make me do it? Come on, baby. You know I'd never hurt you. I'd never do anything like that. I love you so much. You just make me crazy sometimes. That's literally what it is, an abusive relationship.
And everyone looks at that and it's like, it's so obvious. But when I'm comparing it into a marriage, my own experience would be you being the healthy or normal person, read your healthy, normal ideas into how the person is treating you. So therefore you feel bad for them when they hit you. I didn't get hit. I'm not saying that, but just that idea, using that example, they don't just, I like the ABC special, come in and be like, I'm sorry, I'll never do it again. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But there's some way in which they play it, and then now you feel badly. Or like you might have been irritating enough to have caused it. You pushed his buttons or whatnot. So the same idea is, it starts that cycle and that gets deeper and deeper every time. So that thread is there, at least in Teen Mania. I saw it where have you raised the money to come? So you chose, you got fired up emotionally at a concert. They pursued you, made you feel wanted, inspired you in a way that made you feel good. And then you chose it. And now you've worked to go there, and now you're there. And all of a sudden it's not what you wanted it to be or thought it should be, but you chose it. And so you probably need to stay, and so you begin to be a participant in the consent. And I don't think that's understood enough. In all abuse situations, there's a way an abuser will hook you in to give consent, and then therefore you feel responsibility for what's being done to you, and you can't see it as wrong as quickly. So that's a side tangent on abuse. But
about 20 years ago, Kelly, you probably don't even know this. About 20 years ago, I went to like a weekend retreat for like a cult, like literally. And it was like one of those, you know what NXIVM is? Do you remember that?
Yes. Sorry.
Okay.
I just did something on that. Yeah.
It was like that. Okay. It wasn't that. It wasn't like a weird, creepy sex cult, but it was kind of like, it was like a business oriented, mindset cult is kind of what it was. And it was only 3 days. That was all it was. And I went knowing what it was. I knew what it was, and I was familiar with a bunch of the tactics. Okay. I've been into like weird stuff for a really, really long time. All it took was 3 days, and part of it worked on me. It's that effective. And so when people say things like, I'd never be involved in an abusive relationship, I'd never go to a thing like this and stay there once I got talked down to, I'd never, you have no idea what you're talking about. Then you've never been involved in anything bad ever, and somebody's been protecting you from making really, really bad decisions your entire life. You need to find out who that person is and thank them, because that's, I knew what they were doing. I kept notes on stuff. And even then, it was still moderately effective. And so I came back and I was confused for a while. It goofs you up. And because it simulates real experiences, I'll put it this way. It artificially manufactures a false environment by which you have a genuine emotional reaction and a genuine emotional experience as a result. Then they assign value to that emotional experience and emotional result. Wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat, wash, repeat. Doesn't work the first time, but by the 10th time, by the 20th time, you're wanting to please these people and you don't even know why, that kind of thing. All I'm trying to say is that you've got these elements of these things where you have these hyper purposed driven subculture, Christian subcultures that were wildly popular and going for decades long. And then you have these people, they're all Generation X now, or, the generation immediately behind it. A lot of them are in politics. A lot of these people are in business. And I'm sure that, they're not all like program mind control slaves or anything. But my overall point is that you can start seeing the effects of these things and seeing some of the changes of some of these things that have been happening, especially when you look at somebody like Charlie Kirk. And once again, I'm not saying he was part of a mind control cult. I don't think so. I don't think anything. I don't have astoundingly negative things to say about him overall. Okay. I never met him. I don't know. But when you have 3 decades of a ramp up of the idea of young people going out to college campuses and then pushing a political agenda that's wrapped in a Jesus robe, that's kind of what was going on. Everybody keeps talking about Charlie Kirk like he was a missionary or like he was a pastor of a church. He wasn't. He was a political activist who was also Christian and not shy about it. Okay, great. But he was a political activist, That's going to get me canceled from the internet right there,
Well, it's how you would describe even the organization that he started. I mean, that's just a fact. That's not a personal statement. Kind of stepping back, I wanted to know, and I don't think we did this at the beginning, can you describe or define, because you had it written out, Christian nationalism and cultural Christianity? Did we do that? Because I don't think we did.
No, we didn't. And that's where all this kind of leads to. It ultimately leads up to is the idea, and we've talked about it before, that what I'm seeing and have been seeing for a while is this cultural Christianity push. We saw it really clearly, I think, a number of years ago through people like Elon Musk and Jordan Peterson and these tastemakers, that are kind of out there on the political right or the dark web right or whatever. Joe Rogan now apparently goes to church and all this stuff. It's gaining a lot of traction and it's gaining a lot of steam. So we have Christian nationalism is sort of a blending of Christian identity with national identity. whereas the success of the nation is seen as being tied to God's blessings or God's favor. So God is smiling on us. We have to make sure we do the right things, though. And if we do the right things, though, then God will put his hand of protection on us. God will bless us, and God will, make sure that everybody's got a bowl of, Fruity Pebbles in the morning, that kind of thing. Then you have a cultural Christianity, which is identifying as Christian because of tradition or heritage or culture or family history without necessarily having a living faith in Jesus Christ himself. So you don't, what we would call, have a personal relationship. You haven't ever repented. You are aware of who Jesus is, aware of a lot of the concepts, but it's still kind of over there. You operate, it doesn't bother me. I operate in it. It's not a big deal, but it's still not a part of my identity, and, or I should say, an intimate part and an intimate expression of what I know to be true. I am a sinner in need of saving, and the only way that's going to happen is through a repentant faith in Jesus himself.
I like those definitions. The reason I wanted to do that was because I feel like it's not something people are aware is happening, that is at least in this documentary, but it's something I've known about before that documentary, but just that there is a strong push, I don't even know from what group you'd want to say, of a view that America needs to come under basically the biblical Mosaic law, and that's the salvation of our nation, is to return to Christian principles, and that is what being a Christian is. I don't think that's implied. I don't think it's always said, because I've known a lot of people who thought this way, and they aren't jerks or something, And it's, again, you can't argue with saying, wouldn't it be great if better decisions were made on a political level? Of course not. But the way in which God will build his kingdom, by the very nature in which it was prophesied, cannot be politically accomplished. End of story. The way it's described in Daniel as the final kingdom that dominates and takes over the world, it's built of different material, it comes about by a different way, and it accomplishes its glory by a completely unworldly way. So somebody who's telling you that the gospel and the kingdom of God is going to be forwarded by the kingdom of a nation is not understanding the gospel.
And that's one of the reasons I think it's so important, because we've touched on this over and over again, is recognizing that Jesus, in order for salvation to, in order for the cross to be correct, in order for salvation to be true, in order for Jesus to be who he was, he has to be prophet, he has to be priest, and he has to be king. And he has to be all of them, not one delayed by 1,000 years, then another delayed by 1,000 years, and then another. You can't have salvation in Christ unless he's currently king and ruling in heaven right now. And he's also high priest and your intercessor right now. He's also the sacrifice. He's all of it right now. And it has to be right now. So the idea that somehow he's going to have that glorious kingdom in heaven, and then through his church and through believers, which that's what the church is, just believers, running around on earth, doing things, whatever his purposes are, and however that all works out, that's the kingdom here on earth. That's what it is. But the kingdom's in heaven. It's not an already and not yet kind of thing. It is a spiritual truth that gets acted out in physical reality, but it's never a physical reality in the way that people think. But to then say he's already gone up into the highest, and then say, no. He's actually going to wrap that all up and then bring it all back down to the earth and then live it out for 1,000 years. Then he's going to pack it all up and then bring it back up again. And he's going to go back and forth a few times. Like, it's like, what is he using U-Haul? Like, how is he doing all of this? It doesn't work. It doesn't work theologically. It doesn't work thematically. But here's the thing. If you have that view that kingdom is true right now up in heaven, then Christian nationalism gets wiped off the table. It's not even an option anymore. It's great, the idea that maybe you want to vote for somebody in a political office who's a Christian. That's awesome. And he's like, look, I don't like abortion, so I'm not going to be supporting it. Awesome. Sounds like a great candidate to me. But then he's like, you know what we need to do? We need to hasten all of these things in order to bring Jesus back, so that way we can set up the kingdom for him. And that's what it is. The idea is that they're going to use the United States as the vehicle in order to set up the preliminary kingdom of God here on earth so that Jesus, I guess, has an easier time when he comes back and rules from the third temple in Jerusalem. It's something like that.
And there's a subtle way of we're accomplishing something for him, but we're also more pleasing to him. And that's what you want to look for is anything that's a behavioral list. Like if you do this, then you'll get this. Well, now you're approaching God like Buddha. So there's a couple of things that I've thought of that are unbiblical about it. And a lot of it is, as Americans, we've tied America as Israel, like the new chosen. I just want to point out we are 250 years old. The kingdom of Christ has been around for 2,000 some years. So I have no delusion to believe that America is God's chosen nation. It's just not. Sorry. And he doesn't have a chosen nation. And the way you understand that is if you want to be comparing and drawing these parallels with Israel, I think we nail it down on our car ride home from the retreat. For a Gentile in the Old Testament, in order to have the salvation available to him, he had to come under the nation of Israel's law. And the nation of Israel was called God's son. So in order to be saved, they had to conform themselves to the Son and be found in him. That's how you hide in the nation, almost have that picture. Now, Jesus comes on the scene. He is the true Israel. He fulfills the sonship of Israel. And so now, if you're looking for a nation, it's Christ himself. And now, again, the same thing. The only way to be saved is to be found in the Son. We're done with nations. I don't think, your nationality, your identity is always Christ. It is not an American. I love being an American. Don't get me wrong. I get teared up when the national anthem plays at a football game. I'm not saying I don't want to live here, but I'm saying at the end of the day, I am not found to be blessed by God, by the nation of America. I'm found to be blessed by God because I'm found in the Son. And that's it. There is no nation. There is no kingdom that's going to come about by the nation. The other side is in John, I think it's 17, when he's praying, the process by which he talks about the building of his kingdom after he is gone is that we are joined to him. We have the fruit of the relationship within the Trinitarian, that bond we now have through Christ, overflows and becomes developed more within the body. So it's individual, then the body. And then all he says is the world's going to know that the Father loved you because I loved you and because you love me. And now this is how they'll know, by your love for one another. That's how you're creating an army or you're going to go to battle. It's not going to look like what people are saying it's going to look like. So now it's your turn to rant.
I agree with all of what you're saying right there. And it gets sticky and it gets charged because it's the Middle East and there's a whole lot of stuff. And everybody has these bizarre extremes where they say, if you, it's something like this. The very people that were being canceled just a few short years ago for not supporting all the trans identity issues and stuff that was going on there are now all of a sudden supporting the idea of canceling people that don't agree with whatever their political idea is. And by the way, guys, I'm just throwing this out there. The introduction of canceling, two things. The whole reason for it was never so that it was to introduce the idea to you so that way you got used to it, so that way you would accept it in general, not always fight against it because it was always going to get flipped. And so then it became a viable tool because payback, or because revenge or, all the Christian-like things like payback and revenge, right? And so you didn't know that was an option until it got introduced and inflicted on you first. And I'm not saying getting canceled was easy or anything like that. I know one dude, not intimately personally, but I know one dude that got canceled. And I know some of the stuff that went on in his head and stuff. It's super bad, okay? It's super, super bad. We don't want to do that to anybody else. It needs to stop and it needs to just end. But that's why it was introduced. The second reason, now that it's acceptable, meaning now that it is a reasonable way to go about and solve your problems, guess what the mark of the beast is? Guess. What are the results for not taking the mark of the beast? Cancellation, you say? Absolutely. So congratulations. You know what I mean? You're like, I would never do anything that the devil's bad and all that stuff. We need to cancel those guys because they said something I didn't like about that one nice college boy. Like, what do you think is going on, man? You know, didn't the Bible tell you that Satan is the craftiest, the most clever? He's like super extra double plus clever. And then you're like, no, I can't get fooled. I would never participate in evil. Let's cancel people, though. Okay, so apparently I'm going to rant, too. Here we go. Oh, let's do another thing. Okay, Christian nationalism. What's the goal? What's the goal of Christian nationalism? It's to combine religion with government and put them both together. If only there was a book of the Bible that warned about doing something like that. You know, if only, okay?
I don't know what you're talking about. I got
something for you here. Let's just do this. Let's just go through a quick little history lesson, okay, of how on top of it and Johnny on the spot Christians usually are. Read the whole Bible, guys, all the way to the end. The history of the union of the church and state. Early Rome. For the first three centuries, not a whole lot of Christians were like, you know what we need to do? Take over the halls of power and install a godly king. Like they weren't 300 years. Then all of a sudden Constantine in the early 4th century, he legalized Christianity and he fused it all together. Now all of a sudden you got this idea of a Christendom, the idea of this Christian empire concept. Then you go through the medieval period and what happens? Throughout the Middle Ages, kings and rulers claimed to have divine authority. That also goes back, I would go way further back into before the flood. But it's a danger thing because you've got that original occult concept, and now you got this idea that kings are divinely appointed. And I'm not saying that there's scripture on that. Like Romans 13. I get that. But there's a difference between God sovereignly being in control and then you saying you harness the power of God. You are a God unto yourself, and you have divine authority, and you speak on God's behalf. I'm going to go ahead and rule a nation now. Then you got the Protestant Reformation around the 16th century. Reformed Protestant churches became state churches, reinforcing the fusion of political authority and religious identity together so that being a citizen meant being a certain type of Christian. So you'd have entire nations that were all of a certain denomination, one or another, or whatever it is. And in order to be a member, be a citizen of that nation, you had to identify, you had to be of that denomination. Now you're moving into colonial America and the idea of civil religion. And one of the things that Puritans did when they all moved to the United States way back in the day before we formalized everything, they saw themselves as being a, quote, new Israel. The idea that they were chosen by God, brought out of the heresy, brought out of the muck and the nonsense, and that they were going to go about and on a divine, godly mission, create a new nation that by their work, their effort, they were going to be blessed by God because Deuteronomy 7:6, for you are a people holy to the Lord your God has chosen you to be a people of his treasured possession out of all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. It's the idea of this divine destiny. God's going to bless us if we just make God super happy and don't give God the sads. Then you've got the 19th century Christianity, the idea of manifest destiny. You can see these threads as they move through time and how these ideas keep moving, changing a little bit, but at their core, they're still the same concept. The idea of manifest destiny is a belief that God ordained America's power and influence as proof that America has been on the right track in the way that it's conducted its affairs. And then you go into the 80s, the 90s, and beyond, the idea of the religious right, whether it's the moral majority with Jerry Falwell, the Christian Coalition, and Pat Robertson, this concept and this idea that we see as it moves forward into the O's and into the teens, what we're talking about with this teen, whatever,
Mania,
Ron
yeah.
Luce. Yeah, Teen Mania, Ron Luce, and something concert by fire. This whole idea of we're all now part of this holy war, this holy thing. God has ordained us. We got to make sure he stays happy with us. And the only way that's going to happen is if we completely take over the halls of power and inflict everybody, all of the dirty, filthy, unwashed masses who are not believers. What was the word that you used? The unreached or whatever?
Oh, unreached people groups.
The unreached. And inflict upon them the Christianity that's for their benefit. And I don't know if anybody's aware of this. I'm just throwing it out there. History is rife with people doing things for your benefit and hurting people horribly for your good over and over and over. It's not the tyrannical psycho that you have to worry about. It's a tyrannical psycho that's doing it for your good. That's the most dangerous person on the planet. I just see too many echoes of this stuff going on, man. It's not good. It's not good. And I'm sympathetic to it. I like the idea of a godly power. I like the idea of a godly nation. I do. But this isn't the way to do it, guys. You know?
Well, and I think that there's it's got that Adam feel to it, that it's like more and more it's easy to break down if you understand that what he desired to do in the garden was to have God by his own definition and by imposing his will on God and over his life. If you are a part of anything, whether it be a relationship, a church, or a movement, and you get the strong sense that this might be worded as an attempt to impose our will and our agenda on the way God is working, that's a danger. That's language you're looking for. Like basically, we will bring the change of God. That isn't actually what you're ever called to do. Sorry. So when he says in Deuteronomy, "For you are a people holy to the Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for his treasured possession out of all the peoples who are on the face of the earth." You apply the Israel definition we just talked about. So in this, he's talking about Israel. Israel's fulfilled in Christ. So now the verse is, it's not meant to be read by me as a Christian, but if you see in the fullness of God's plan, you are a people holy to the Lord your God because you are found in Christ. And now, like anytime Paul talks about being a soldier or Peter talks about being sanctified and holy, it's less about morality and it's more about position. And so also, when Paul talks about being a soldier, it has the implication of resisting the way of the common civilian. I kind of was Googling around on that today. That was an interesting point by a commentator. And I thought, oh, that's very interesting. So instead of saying we need to overtake the world and be a part of the world system, he's saying, no, remember who you belong to. That's always what he's going for. Those were my few thoughts. The other, I don't know if we're here yet. We're just randomly ranting. I understand that. People are like, what is the topic again? But I think another thing to look for is outward morality. If you ask me what it is to be a Christian, the last thing I will do is give you a list of things to do, because that is not what being a Christian is. So if I'm going to tell you, you have to behave a certain way, you have to read your Bible every day, you have to do this, do that, do this, that's a sign. Morality is another way. It's just the way of Adam. It's my will, the way I want to have morality, the way I want to have holiness. I'm going to just decide. That does not mean you go out and just do a bunch of bad stuff. But being a Christian is about learning who you are now, not how you should behave. It's putting the caboose before the train, whatever the analogy is for that. And it's what, obviously, if you've listened to the show, you know, like Tim Keller, I feel like his entire ministry was trying to dismantle the religion of morality. And that's a good sign, because we have a religion and it's doing better and behaving well. So any movement, any speaker, any advocate, anybody who's giving you a list of things to do and promising you by your good behavior you'll have a certain result, I wouldn't listen to them.
And that's just it, that's one of the key points I think we keep coming back to over and over again. Jesus warned of the idea of wolves in sheep's clothing and not wolves in wolves' clothing, is that whether you are intentionally trying to do it or not, sometimes, you know, what do they say? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. I am sympathetic to the idea of a Christian nationalism. I am sympathetic to the idea of a Christian nation or Christian culture. I am sympathetic to all of these things. Probably empathetic would even be a better word. I had this, you don't even know this, but I was probably maybe before I started 5-6 years ago, I got to a point where I started thinking about, I've been very, let's just put it gently, politically minded for easily a 20-year period of time, to the point where I was annoying and alienating people on a level that, like, you know, it's like, let's just say Thanksgiving was hard to do with me. Okay. And I couldn't understand why people didn't care about freedom. And I couldn't understand why people didn't care about the future. And I couldn't understand why people didn't care about future generations. And I just thought that it was because people were, you know, fat, dumb, and lazy, and they had the good times, and nobody's going to think about things that don't exist when you have everything you need. And I'm not saying that I changed my mind on that necessarily, because, you know, but my mind has recognizing that the kingdom is now and that I have to choose now. Am I going to be a citizen of the United States first, or am I going to be a citizen of the kingdom of heaven first? Because who's my master? You can't have two. And what is it? That doesn't mean I'm not going to go to war and fight for the United States if that's what has to happen. Or that doesn't mean I'm not going to whatever, okay? But it means that my loyalty and my everything is to the kingdom of heaven. It's to Jesus first and foremost. And if that ever comes in conflict or comes at odds with the idea of wanting to put together a Christian nation so that Jesus can come here and be king here when I already know he's king already, okay, that's one of those discernment moments. That's one of those moments where ideally you look at it and go, okay, wait, what? What is going on? Not they're wrapping everything in Christian packaging. You can be a good guy and theologically wrong. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to be a villain in order to make a mistake. Charlie Kirk was just like a regular guy as far as I know. And he was a younger guy too. Most of the stuff that I knew in my 20s, by the time I got to my 30s and through my 40s, that was when I found out I didn't really know exactly everything. Obviously, he's smarter than me. I'm not saying he's not. And obviously, he's, he gets stuff. Okay. I'm not saying he's not. But what I am saying is, it doesn't mean he's 100% theologically right on everything. And you learn stuff as you grow over time. And there are a number of times in situations where people they're so sure. I was so sure. Mm-hmm. Now I'm not so sure. Now I think maybe this in this instance or whatever, that kind of thing. I can't think of a topic or whatever, but the overall point that I'm trying to make is that when you're operating from a place that is not theologically sound and theologically grounded, there's an open door, and that open door can look like one thing, but it's another or something. Maybe the analogy's bad. Here's the point. Okay. I keep saying, here's the point. The idea of, let me do it this way. You have this idea of Christ is going to have this 1,000-year rule in Jerusalem and for 1,000 years. And that he's going to be king of the earth, and he's going to be seated on the throne of power, the seat of power, and he's going to put all of his enemies underneath his feet. And then you have ancient Rome. Who was the Caesar? The Caesar was the man God who sat at a seat of power, a special throne, and his goal was to put everybody underneath his feet. And what is the beast of the sea and the beast of Revelation? It's the dragon gave the beast his throne and great authority, and it's global power that's arising, and it's going to try to put all of its enemies underneath his feet. And then you have the idea of Christian nationalism, and it's this idea of putting a godly thing, God first, seated in the throne, so to speak, of the Capitol building or whatever, symbolically, but the idea of forcing everybody to be part and participate as a Christian in a Christian nation and kind of put all your enemies under your feet. It's too similar. These things are too close together. And I have a bunch of different vector points on this. I don't want to talk forever, but I'll hit on these things. But I kind of what do you think? Do you think that I'm way off base on this? The idea of all these things kind of lining up in this concept where then you got Christ's kingdom in heaven. It's not earthly. It's not worldly. All of his enemies are being put under his feet. And however he's doing it, and it's different. It's different than all the other ones that seem to be the same.
Well, and so the idea of the common thread being the pursuance of the utopia, right? Is that kind of some way to sum it up?
The golden age, the utopia.
The golden age. So there's an effort in which there's a mindfulness for what would be appealing now. So I would say it's easy to hear the things that we're hearing and think they sound good and to think they sound comforting. What are they promising and what are the goals? And because so often any teaching, not just this kind of stuff, you have to think, well, why did I respond? Like, what is it that appeals to me about that? And often if you boil it down, it's a comfort. I want to have a comfortable society to live in. I don't want to have to feel the tension of our morality falling apart. That's scary. And so we don't want that. We don't want those things. And so it's always driven by some thing inside you, good, bad, or ugly. You got to look at it. And I think the motivation to seek out a utopia is the constant desire of anyone, but especially the church in America, for comfort. And I don't mean like a cozy bed. I mean a culture that agrees with me, and to not have any difficulty in our church, in our walk, in our Christianity. And so we talked, I think it was a couple episodes ago, about what tribulation really meant, and as far as what the meaning of the word is. So that constant pressure, the contrast of me versus the world. And so that should be growing more and more as I grow as a Christian, because the world is living in defiance of who I am. So if I'm trying to change the world to be in compliance, it's almost like you're fighting the wrong battle or something. I don't think you're understanding that it's supposed to be uncomfortable. I don't think we were promised to be comfortable. And that's what we want when we're pursuing this. Would you agree that's what the utopia's appeal is?
Oh, completely. That's what it's all about. And Christ never says that you're going to be comfortable. He says the exact opposite. He says your life is you're going to have tribulation. And here's the thing. It's like that old expression. It's like, the longer you stare at the abyss, like the abyss stares back at you, and you realize it's not the abyss that's changed, but it's you. Or maybe I'm mixing two metaphors. But the instant you try to manufacture as humans, you try to perfect the world and remake it in your own image, whether it's government or whether it's any of this stuff. And once again, don't get me wrong, I like the United States a lot. I really do. Like, I really, really do. I really do. And I'm not against it, and it's super awesome. And like a lot, it's really super awesome. But attempting to mold people into the form and shape of in-group and out-group, Christian and non-Christian, enemy and good guy, and all this stuff, doing it all in the name of God, can only go wrong. It can only go wrong. There's no way that the perishable, corrupted flesh of men, no matter how super saved they all are or claim that they are, you can't do it alone. There's always going to be somebody else in the room with you. You know what I mean? Even if you have the best of intentions and you personally are the purest of heart, you still need others. And there's always going to be infiltrators. There's always going to be somebody knocking the car off the track or attempting to seize power, because once you construct the mechanisms of power, what's your guarantee it's going to stay that way? And once you speak on behalf of God with his authority, now questioning you isn't a matter of whether you're right or wrong. It's a matter of whether that person's questioning God or not. Like, It's like, I'm not that smart, and even I know this. You know what I mean? It's like, guys, what are we doing? I don't think this Christian nationalism thing is such a smoking hot idea. Aside from the fact, once again, I want to hit a few more key points. It lines up a little too closely with, the beasts of the sea in Revelation. The idea of there being a temple center of worship, being a global authority, claiming peace and security and safety. Remember that all of a sudden destruction comes on absolutely everybody when there's peace and safety? Maybe we shouldn't be trying to, that shouldn't be our goal. Like, if it's peace and stuff is a side effect, like, I'm okay with that. Let's do some peace treaty stuff. But I'm saying it shouldn't be the driving focus of everything. The idea of citizenship or loyalty marks, like through the mark of the beast. It's just, you go down the list, and it's shocking at a certain point that some dum-dum wearing a black V-neck t-shirt in some thing on the little corner on the internet is like, guys, aren't you all smarter than me? I don't think we should be trying to mix the state and religious authority together. I feel like Revelation had something to say about all of this.
And I think we've said it already, but the thought keeps coming back as you're describing the things, the morality, over and over. I'm going to say the morality. There is no room in that kind of kingdom for an unclean person.
Correct.
Because the only way I'm going to feel comfortable with you is if you are safe and if you are perfect and you behave well. And I know that that's not quite what you're hearing when people say it, but the fact that there's such a drive to return to like the Mosaic law equals safety to people. I can, then now everybody's behaving and they're doing what they're supposed to do, and we all agree with each other and it's all going to go fine. That isn't the spirit-led life, one. But where is the room at the table? If you're going to list off how do you be a good citizen, how do you be a good Christian, and the list is morality, there's no room at the table for the person who's making the mistakes. And that isn't what the ministry of Christ looked like at all. He wasn't. I feel like he was kind of like, you politicians do your thing, I'll do mine. I know he was engaged somewhat, but it wasn't where he went. It wasn't what it meant for him to minister to the people. Anyway.
No, it's not. And what you ultimately have is when you have this and by the way, I'm calling it right now. Christian nationalism, cultural Christianity, they're only in their infant stages with this. They are ramping up. They're going to become stronger, more influential. It will absolutely dominate just about every corner of culture as a response to the way things that have been over easily the last decade let alone even going further back. And the thing to keep in mind is that both of these things, especially when together, faith gets redefined as belonging. And the fruit of that faith is social order, and it's not repentance, and it's not renewal. It is a different gospel. It is a completely different gospel. And once you are preaching a different gospel in the name of Jesus, you're wrong. Period. You're wrong. End of story. And I don't need to be super smart in order to figure it out. And if we're some of the last voices or whatever speaking out against this, I guess so be it. But there is no room for the spirit indwelt believer that has a witness of humility to all of this and is not trying to force itself through mechanisms of domination, which is what political power is. It is a force situation. So to kind of close it all off, at a minimum, Christian nationalism, I got this written down here. At a minimum, Christian nationalism and cultural Christianity both offer a counterfeit gospel. It's belonging, identity, and power without repentance and transformation. And at worst, they become political. I guess I'm just repeating myself here. Leveraging fear and demanding loyalty, all in the name of Christ, while mirroring the image of the beast. You want to know what the image of the beast is? It's this concept. It's this thing. It's a political movement that's not government owned and operated. It's by the people kind of thing. It's culture. It's this concept, this thing that looks like Christianity, smells like Christianity, says it's Christianity, but ultimately it's not. And, I'm not 100% saying this is definitely the image of the beast, but the image of the beast is going to show up at some point. It'll look something like this Christian nationalism, something like this cultural Christianity, something like this kind of concept. A bunch of self-righteous people all doing everything because they know better, and it's all being done in the name of God. And how dare you, sir? I am speaking from the Lord. He says, or whatever it is. Next thing you know, it's like, what is going on here? I'm not questioning God. I'm questioning you twerp, you're in a fear-based system when you consider everything that we've talked about and everything we said, and your first response is something to the effect of, well, what do we do then about how do we respond to what happened to Charlie? I am not okay with what happened to him. Okay. And at the end of the day, you've got a woman who is now a widow, and you got two very small kids who will not have a father. They'll grow up without him. And he was, assassinated very publicly. The whole thing is awful. Okay. It's not okay at all. It's not okay. But the idea of, well, what do we do? Are we just supposed to stand around with targets painted on our back when, the woke leftist psychoactivists, if they want Christianity to, be 6 feet under, they're going to, who are they going to go after next? What are we supposed to do? Just stand around and wait until our ticket gets punched. Is that it? Okay. Here's my response to that. All right. There's this guy named Polycarp, and Polycarp you had John. Okay. So you had Jesus, and then Jesus instructed John. And then John got boiled in oil, and then he went to the island of Patmos, and he wrote Revelation. And John had a disciple guy, or an apostle, I guess. I forget how you define that. And his name was Polycarp. And Polycarp, he ended up living a really long time. And Polycarp ended up getting executed. And this is the story of Polycarp's execution, because I think it matters. The long and short of it is, the Romans kept trying to kill Paul over and over again, or not Paul, John, and he just wouldn't die. And then they tried to kill Polycarp, and they're like, well, maybe this will, it'll work on him. So they go ahead and decide that they're going to, do you renounce Jesus? He's like, no way, Jose, I ain't doing that. You go ahead and get me. And so they went and piled the wood real high and put up a post in there, and they were going to nail his hands to it. And he was like, you don't have to nail my hands to it. I'm not leaving. And they're like, you're going to try to run away. And he's like, I'm totally not going to try to run away. He goes, God already gave me told me a week ago, you guys were going to kill me, and it was going to be now. So I'm not going anywhere. So they go ahead and put Polycarp. And it's, by the way, you can look this up and read it all for yourself. It's like the letters of Polycarp or something like that. And to one of the churches, Smyrna or something. I forget which one. So they go ahead and just tie his hands behind his back, put Polycarp on the bonfire, and then light the whole thing up. And then apparently the fire goes around in like a giant arc around him. And while he's in there, he's got his hands up, and or maybe his hands behind him, I guess if they were tied. He's asking God to forgive all the people that are executing him right now or trying to kill him. And then he's also singing hymns to God, and he's praising Jesus. And that's what he's doing while they're trying to burn him. And then they said that he ended up looking like he was a really nicely baked loaf of bread. And there was a delightful fragrance of frankincense in the air as he voluntarily, and said so apparently, offered himself up as a sacrifice to God. And then all the Romans and everybody kind of freaked out because he just wasn't dying, and he should be. And so they ended up taking a guy and say, you go run up there and go stab him. So he grabbed the dagger and ran up there, and he run him through. And then, according to what the letters of Polycarp or whatever, all the blood gushed out of him. It put out the whole entire fire, and then he was dead. So are we just supposed to stand there and get killed? Probably also forgive the people that are doing it to you. How about that one? We can one up this. And probably, why don't you go ahead and be praising God in the process of while it's all happening, because it's only through his breath that you even have life in the first place. It becomes very, very easy to forget all of these things when we go us and them. What am I supposed to do? Stand around with a target on my back so some psycho wackadoo can go ahead and take a long shot at me or something like that? I don't know if that's what God calls you to do. Then yeah, I hate to say it that way. I'm not championing the idea of it myself, and I hope it doesn't go down like that. I really don't. But we got all these examples. What did Jesus do? He wasn't throwing sticks. You know what I mean? Like, at a certain point, isn't that what the gospel is? To have Christ be more important than even your own life, than even your own thing, and realizing that there's a wider planet, a wider view of everything that's going on, and it's not some small, narrow window of time in some nation and tiny little corner of the blue marble earth after about 250 years or so. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't think that, I'm not saying Charlie did anything wrong. I'm not saying he did anything wrong when it comes to all this stuff and all of it. If anything, guy's got a lot of guts, man. He painted a big target on his back, and he went out there, and, that could have happened to him at any time. Okay? I'm not taking that away from him. The guy had a lot of guts. He really did. But the response of people, your response requires the same amount of courage that he had, the same amount of courage, and I'm going to one-up it. I'm going to say Polycarp had more courage than him. The kind of courage that Polycarp had, and the kind of courage that John had, and maybe as close as we can to trying to have the kind of courage that Christ had, because that's what it's about. It's not about a political movement. It's not about a political movement. It's not about the better future. The better tomorrow is the other side of the great white throne of judgment. That's it. That's all there is. That's it. And I like air conditioning and all that stuff too, but like, it's just,
it always comes back to toilet paper and air conditioning.
Always comes back to
very important. And tacos.
Toilet paper, air conditioning, and electric lights, man. That's just how I see it, and that's what I think about. So when you think of Charlie's life and his legacy, when you think of the idea of Christian nationalism or the idea of cultural Christianity, you have thoughts, and you're like, Laura and I are completely way off base, or you agree, or you've got an idea or a thought that didn't get brought up here that zeroes it in a little bit differently. I would like to hear it. I know Laura would too, so go ahead and reach out to us through email. And I just want to say thanks for hanging with us for this entire time, and we'll talk at you next time. Hey, thanks for listening to Naughty versus Nice. If this episode hit home for you, or, got us stepped on your toes a little, but in a good way, go ahead and follow, and leave us a review. It helps us out way more than you could possibly know. We're on all the socials at Naughty versus Nice. That's VERSUS Nice. And if you believe in what it is that Laura and I are doing, you can definitely pop on over to patreon.com/Naughty versus Nice and give us a hand there as well. Thanks for walking this road with us as we have these conversations, talk about these wider concepts, and discuss what it means to be followers of Christ. We really appreciate you joining us, and we'll talk at you next time.